Hello again. So this clip today is part one of two clips about wired and wireless networks. People always seem to think that they know a lot about networks because they've got one at home, your wireless network that might be provided by your Sky or Virgin router, for example, that lets you connect all of your devices together, and then you can do fun things with them, like access the internet. Okay, but it's important that we know a little bit more than that. So hopefully in this clip you'll be able to explain the difference between a wired and a wireless network and describe some of the different types of network. Firstly, it's important that we talk about how networks are formed. So linking together computer devices so that they can communicate and exchange information is what forms a network. Okay, and remember, computer devices can be anything from an actual personal computer, like the ones you use in your computer science lessons, to a laptop, to a phone, to a games console, to a smart TV, to a tablet. All of those things, when joined together to share information or resources like a printer, become a network. Okay, so a local area network consists of computers and devices controlled in a single or local area, such as a school, an office, or a home. They might be connected by wire or wirelessly through a router, and that's typically the network that you've got at home, a local area network. Each computer or device can run independently, but they can exchange information through switches with other devices on the network. A wide area network is just basically a collection of lots of local area networks. So it'd be like, for example, your home network being connected to your best mate's home network. You would have created a wide area network. So connecting one LAN to another or multiple LANs over a large distance forms a wide area network, or a WAN. They can span from one building to another to around the entire globe, using telephone wires, fibre optic undersea cables, and even satellites to connect them all up. And the largest one today is the internet, the one that's probably the most used as well. So you've got your network, it's either LAN or WAN. What affects the performance of it then, more than anything? Well, firstly we've got to talk about bandwidth. Okay, now this is bits per second, not bytes, don't forget, bits per second. It's the amount of data that can pass between two network devices per second. Okay, now your internet bandwidth speed, which your ISP, your internet service provider, will advertise to you, if you're on Virgin it might be 100, 200 megabits per second. If you're on Sky Fibre like me, which is, it's not as good, I get about 30 megabits per second, 30 to 40 megabits per second, which is more than enough for what I need it for. And there are several key factors that affect bandwidth. Okay, so the quality of the transmission media, if it's wired or wireless, we'll talk a little bit about that later on. But we've talked in class about how with ADSL broadband, you've got, as the data's travelling along the copper lines of a telephone wire, the signal starts to degrade somewhat over the distance, and the further away you are from the telephone exchange, the slower that speed will be at the end of it. There might be interference from external factors, so in the home it might be other electronic devices such as microwaves, and also if you've got lots of people accessing the network at the same time, the bandwidth is shared out between all of those users, lowering everyone's connection speed. So you'll experience that probably more than anywhere at home. If you're streaming something on one device and somebody else is streaming something on another device, and then two more people come along and do the same thing, that 30 megabits per second that I've got is great if I'm just streaming. But if four people are streaming, then that's getting split between the four of us, and we're getting less than 10 megabits per second each. And that's assuming that there aren't any other external factors causing interference. So let's talk a little bit about the client-server network, okay? Because that's the sort of system that we've got here in school. So a client-server network is when a main computer, a server, okay, controls access and hosts programs and is accessed from multiple client computers. So much like what we have in school, we have the server computer, which is in a room next to Mufti Oasis' office, and then around school, every computer that you see is a client computer. The server controls access. So when you type in your username and password, it's the server that grants you access to the client, not the computer itself. And when you want to open up software, okay, a lot of the software is hosted on the client, but if it's a thin client, all of the software will be hosted on the server instead, and could even run from the server rather than the client computer. This means that client machines can be, especially a thin client machine, can be a low spec device, meaning it's cheaper and you can have more of them than it would be if you gave everybody their own individual computer and they weren't connected to a network. That being said, the computers we use in school are not thin clients, and the spec on them's good enough to run the software on the computer itself. But all the files that you create, they're stored on the server. And that means that when you go from one client to another, all of your files are available for you, and that's a good thing. It means that you can log on anywhere in school and all of your files are right there where you left them. Obviously, some of the perks of doing this are that in terms of making sure that all, the computers are all secure. You've got antivirus software that can be controlled from the server. You've got your firewall and a hardware firewall protecting the server and therefore protecting the clients that sit within it as well. And when we're backing up your files, they all get backed up to that server incrementally. We'll talk about full and incremental backups in another video, but they're stored incrementally and they're stored on that server. And that's why if you accidentally delete a file, we can get it back for you. And that happens very regularly indeed. And then finally for this first clip, what a peer-to-peer network. And my first network, I didn't even know I'd made this, by the way. The first network I ever created was joining one PlayStation 1 to another PlayStation 1. It was great. It meant that me and my mate, we could play a racing game and have a separate screen each rather than a split screen. The split screen was okay, but having your own screen was great. It was brilliant. Particularly good, imagine playing split screen Call of Duty where you can see the other person and see if they can see you when you've got your own screen. It's amazing. So that was my first experience of networking and peer-to-peer networks. All computers within a peer-to-peer network act as both a client and a server, okay, and they share files, programs and network access. So in that situation that I've just explained, we both had to have the same game in our PlayStations running at the same time for the experience to work. And security permissions are shared across the network, and a user can access the content of any other user's computer on the same network. So when it's peer-to-peer, I could, in that situation, there was no files to access. But if I took my computer at home and connected it to another computer at home in a peer-to-peer network setup, you'd be able to see all the files on my computer and I'd be able to see all the files on yours. Might be fine in the home, probably not so in a work situation. So just to summarise this section, we've talked about networks being formed when two computational devices, computer devices, are joined together. Remember, that's phones, tablets, games consoles, PCs, laptops, the works. Within a home setting or a business setting, you might have a LAN, a local area network, where each computer or device can run independently but exchange information through a switch, so that you can share, for example, a printer, or you can share a network storage device where you might have files saved that people want to access from lots of different computers. As soon as you connect two LANs together, you've created a WAN. And remember, the biggest or the largest WAN today is the internet. We talked about things that affect the performance of a network. So the bandwidth is a measure of how many bits per second, the amount of data that can pass between two devices per second. And we said, that the transmission media, and we said we'll talk more about wired and wireless, but a wired network is always quicker than a wireless one. We talked about interference, external factors. So at home, somebody turns on the microwave, and that can have an impact on the bandwidth. So can things like walls in the house, so can other devices besides. And also, the more people that are using the network, the more that bandwidth has to be spread out amongst other people. I gave you an example there about streaming video. We talked about client-server networks, much like the one that we use in school, where the computers in the classrooms are clients and they connect up to the server computer. And we talked about peer-to-peer networks, where you might connect a couple of devices together to share files, to share information. And I gave you the a geeky example of the PlayStation 1 to PlayStation 1 peer-to-peer network that I made. Didn't even know it was a network at the time. I was probably about 11. And there I was making networks. It was very easy though. You just plugged one cable into one and one into the other. There was no fancy setups or coding to do to make that work. Okay, thank you.